Hi, and welcome to week 4 of English 103. I can't believe we're already 4 weeks in, mostly because we only have 12 weeks to do this class, so it's flying along. I look forward to reading your exams. I'll be getting those back to you over the next few days. Should have everything graded and returned to everyone by late Thursday, midday Friday at the very latest. And this week, you have the really fun task of figuring out what you're super curious about. The curiosity is the fun part. The coming up with a research question is a little bit more challenging. We're used to making flyby statements, or what I call drive-by statements, about the things that we're interested in, instead of articulating what we're interested in really excellent questions. And so this week is dedicated entirely to kind of getting your feet wet with what we have to offer on the library web pages and in the databases, but also in going from I'm really interested in diabetes to an excellent question about diabetes. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean about that in just a few minutes. The first thing I want to address is that you will be loading up in a journal entry what it is that you're interested in doing with regard to your question. I will come in and make comments in your journal about ways that your question could be strengthened. The deal is I'm not going to rewrite it for you. I'm going to offer you suggestions about how to strengthen it, and then you're going to need to resubmit it, perhaps even a couple of times back and forth with me to figure out how to strengthen it, and then turn it in that final draft form at the end of this week on Sunday night. That should be beautiful. And the only way it can be beautiful is if all of the first draft stuff you do is really solid. So I'm going to comment back on Friday. I'm not really going to comment back on Saturday. That'll be your day to get everything that I commented on kind of worked through in your mind, maybe with some friends, maybe stop by the right place if you need to, maybe talk with your fellows in the discussion board online about how you can make those questions stronger. But all day Friday, I'm going to be checking in on your journal, and we can be chatting back and forth in your journal. So I also want to point out that the earlier you get your question in, the more likely you'll get great feedback from me multiple times, because I'm going to start checking journals tomorrow morning, which is Tuesday morning, and then I'll keep checking them all week long until I leave about 2 o'clock on Friday. So get them in early, and you've got an even better chance of getting lots and lots of good feedback from me instead of just a one-shot feedback from me. So as you're framing these questions, there are some things that can kind of guide you away from choosing poorly how to articulate your question. So going back to my example of diabetes, you might be really interested in diabetes because you have diabetes. That should be an immediate red flag that you want to consider whether or not you have diabetes in a way that means you've been living with it for a while, you pretty much understand it, and you've got some research curiosities about new treatments perhaps, versus I was diagnosed with this last week, I'm highly emotional about it, and so I need to find out everything I can. You don't really want to approach your research question from a place of I'm very emotionally invested in this topic. The reality is that this class is not about making yourself brilliant for the rest of your life on a topic. That may well happen, but the class is about figuring out the process of writing a research paper or finding out the information you need to find out to make a highly impactful decision with the step-by-step kind of guidance you can give yourself once you've learned it the first time. So if you choose a highly emotional topic at this point, you're kind of hobbling yourself right from the very beginning to have a rough process. You're going to have a much rougher time learning the step-by-step of it if you're highly emotionally invested in having to wrestle with that while you're doing the process of the research and the writing. So choose something you're interested in, but not super highly invested in emotionally, if you can do that. The next thing you want to avoid is yes or no questions. So a lot of times students will come in and say, is diabetes treatable? Well, that's a yes or a no, and at that point you're finished. That's all there is to it. That's not the kind of question we're looking for. We're looking for a question where there can be multiple answers, none of them the same as each other, or an answer with multiple nuanced facets to the answer. So we're not going to write a paper that says, here are the two sides. We're going to write a paper at the end of this process that says, here's at least 3 different perspectives in answer to this research question. So it needs to be something that avoids the dialogical yes and no, and that's it. You also want to avoid questions that lead you in a particular way. So you want to avoid a question like, what are the impacts of climate change on hurricanes? Even though much of the science suggests that there is an impact, you need to leave space for the fact that some research may suggest there isn't an impact. So instead of asking what are the impacts, you would say, what is the relationship between climate change and hurricane frequency or intensity, so that you're leaving yourself open to seeing and finding all of the research available. You're not automatically narrowing yourself to just the stuff that agrees with what you already believe. So it's important that we do that, primarily because research isn't about figuring out what I think and then go finding people who agree with me so that I can articulate an argument that has citations. It's about asking a question that you really are open to finding multiple answers to, and then doing that investigating to make yourself smarter. Even at the end of your research, you're not going to come to, and here's the absolute truth. The issues you're dealing with are complex enough that if they weren't a complex issue that has no easy answer, we wouldn't still be talking about it. We're talking about it because it's not simple, and it's not going to be answered by us in one go, in one research semester, in one paper. And finally, you want to avoid questions that have simple answers like, what are the most common treatments for diabetes? Well, you could probably go to Wikipedia and do a quick search and find, oh, here's the 10 most common ways that diabetes is treated. We're looking for something a little more sophisticated than that. So that's where the conversation part comes in. All you can really do is try, stink at it, get some feedback, try again, get a little less stinky at it. That's what learning is. It's being wrong as you learn to get it right. And so if you're doing it wrong, you're doing it right. One thing that you'll want to pay attention to for next week is you have your first abstract and then annotation due. The annotation and the abstract, therefore, has to be a peer-reviewed journal article that presents research. It doesn't have to be in a particular genre. You can write in psychology, you can write in anthropology, you can write in biology, whatever's interesting to you. But it does need to be an academic, peer-reviewed journal article that's not just published in a peer-reviewed journal, editorial, or review of a book. So some little hints to help you along the way. If you have less than one page, you probably are not looking at a peer-reviewed article. If you wonder if it's a peer-reviewed journal, you can either go into journals on the library webpage, look for it, and its detailed record will tell you whether or not it's peer-reviewed. Or you can just Google, is the Journal of Asian Tattoos peer-reviewed? And you should be able to find an answer. You also want to watch how old your sources are, particularly with anything that's cutting edge, medical stuff, psychology. Anything older than 10 years old is really probably too old. That said, if you're doing something on the Peloponnesian War, anything from the 1970s isn't going to automatically be ludicrous because it's too old to be current. The Peloponnesian War happened long enough ago that we probably could use stuff from 200 years ago and still learn worthwhile things we might quote in a paper about the Peloponnesian War. That's hard to say. I don't know why I chose that as an example. And finally, your citation in your annotation has to be in the correct citation style. So the social sciences use APA. The hard sciences like biology, conservation, use CSE. And the humanities, which is mostly just literature and philosophy, sometimes art, history, sometimes history, will use MLA. And not only do you have links in Blackboard that give you detailed websites talking about how to use these citation styles, you also have available to you on the library webpage, main page, down at the bottom on the left, links for different citation style guides that show you this is what a book looks like in MLA. This is what a journal article looks like in APA. So you can print the style guide that's appropriate for you and use it as a model for what you're doing. Fair warning, I take points off for citations that are incorrect, and citation generators don't work. there's always something wrong with it, and the computer's going to do it wrong and upset you when you get points off for letting the computer do it wrong. And the computer's not the one that loses the points, you are. So, as stinky as it is, as obnoxious as it is, build your own citations. Mimic what you see in the guidelines. Look for help online in the links that I've given you. Ask for help from librarians, from me, because if you build your citations yourself, you're going to learn to build citations. And these are not the kinds of things that you memorize. They're changing all the time. You're always going to need to be able to go look at a guide and figure it out instead of just spurt it out because you remember from 5 years ago. So learn to use those guides and learn to mimic them, paying attention to functions like what's capitalized, what's italicized, where did the period go, where does the comma go. And then you'll have a great start on figuring out how to figure out what you need as you go forward in this class and in other classes. As always, if you have any questions, please email me. I would love to answer them here when I come back to do the next video, and I'm available to you all week. I'll be in my office all day tomorrow because it's activities day. Well, not all day. I'm going to go to Comic-Con for a little while and do some other things. But please stop by, visit, ask the questions you have if you're on campus tomorrow, and I'd just love to meet you as well. So have a great week. Let me know what you need.